Hi everyone, welcome to the second in the series of recruitment masterclass. This is Gautam again. Uh, we have been really overwhelmed with the response that we have got from a whole lot of you. Very happy to see that the series that we started last week, last Tuesday to be precise, has seemed to have caught the interest of at least some of you, and you are seeing some value in what we are trying to deliver. That's always good to know. It's good to know that people are finding this useful. A couple of changes we have made in this masterclass as compared to the last one. One is that we are not taking questions online in this because we realized that from our experience earlier that the questions seem they come too many questions which come, and they because the time is only 30 minutes. All our master classes are only going to be for 30 minutes. We find that the flow gets disrupted a bit. So in this time around, we will not take any questions. I'm sorry for that. We are having another session tomorrow, that is on Wednesday, the same time, which is only going to be Q&A. We've already received about 10 questions which we're going to answer. So that we'll be sending out a mail soon for that. So if you want to have questions, then tomorrow is the session that you should also be attending if you have a specific question that you would like me to answer. But this one, we're just going to focus on the topic at hand, which is creating a USP for your business, and more importantly, communicating that USP. So I'm going to look at it in two parts, right? One is identifying a USP. That is the first step. And once you identify the USP, how do you let the market know? Which in the recruiting sense would be, how do you let candidates know and how do you let your clients know that this is the USP of my company? Because both the things are equally important, right? Just creating a USP is not good enough, and without creating it, and not disseminating it, really is pretty useless, because it's just the USP that is known to you. Okay, so let me begin with how do you create a USP for your business? USP, as most of you are familiar, means a unique selling proposition. So without getting into too much jargon, basically USP is the hook. Okay, if you think of it like you hang your coat on a hook, right, at your house. So USP is the hook on which you hang your business. So that is the central message that you convey about your business. That is what you want to be known for, right? And you want to be known for this across all your stakeholders, and primarily three. One is, of course, your customers, which is your clients. Second is candidates, and third is your own employees, right? And in case you have investors, then that would be the fourth. So basically, it's one common message which you want to be known for, right, in the minds of your stakeholders. So let me give you some examples of So USP is not to be confused with a tagline, right? So Nike's "Just Do It," right, which I'm sure all of you are familiar. That's not a USP. That's a tagline, and I won't touch upon tagline today because that's a totally different thing altogether. So I'm just going to focus on USP, but I thought it was important for me to reiterate that USP is not equal to tagline, right? So that's the first. So what is the USP? So let's look at the recruiting business, for example. How can you create a USP for yourself? So let's look at a USP at three levels. One way to create a USP, very simply put, is based on the domain that you source for. So for example, you can take a USP saying, I am a financial services recruiting firm. That's my USP. That means I only hire for the financial services industry. Believe me, that's enough, right? It might appear a very commonplace to you. What's the big deal? But it's not. It is a big deal, right? You are creating a positioning in the mind of your stakeholders that I just do financial services, right? Within financial services, if you want, you can take a even more niche position, right? I just do banking, for example. So I am just a recruiting firm which hires for the banking industry. That's it. I don't even do insurance, right? And in banking, I can do across banking. So I can do wholesale, I can do investment, I can do retail banking. So any banking, but only banking, right? So that is a very simple way to define a USP, right? I am a recruiting firm which focuses on the banking industry, and I'm not getting into a tagline. The tagline is different, but that is becomes a USP, and that is the message that you drive with your candidates. That means everybody who's in the banking industry should obviously know you, because you are a banking industry specialist. You drive with your customers, which in this case would be banks, and that will also get to referrals and word of mouth. And you drive with your employees. That means every single person working in your organization basically is clear that as a company you only hire for the banking industry, right? So that becomes a very, very clear USP. And believe me, once you pick it, you should not really change, because these things take a while, right? So don't say that I have picked a USP in May of 2016, but I want to change it in November of 2016 because nothing is happening. Don't do that. If you need some more conviction, take your time. But remember, once you pick it, follow it up for at least 12 to 18 months. Otherwise, you're just wasting time and energy, right? The whole thing of a USP is that unless it's followed up upon, there's no point embarking on this exercise, right? So coming back to the discussion, coming back to the conversation we were having earlier, it could be as simple as picking a domain, right? Which I discussed with you. Let's look at another way you can look at a USP, right? Another way you can look at a USP is the culture of your company. You can define your company. That's the way I did it when I was running a recruiting firm, right? I defined my company on the basis of speed, right? Energy, right? I didn't use the word energy, but I used the word speed, but basically it was coming from energy. So the whole organization culture was around doing things quickly, right? Same with customers, with candidates, with employees. We didn't have that many investors because it was a self-invested company, but we did have investors, and the same message would have gone to them. So the whole company was basically focused on doing things quickly. It was easy to communicate that with clients. Like, we were turning around things much faster. We were being able to deliver maybe within 24 to 48 hours and deliver in substantial volume, right? So the way we picked our USP was primarily tagging into company culture, and we used speed in all our communication, right? Internal, external, in all our talks with employees, in our talks with customers, in our taglines on the email. We just use speed, right? And that then over a period of time became our USP, right? So again, you can turn around and say, what's the big deal with speed? But others didn't pick it, we did, right? And we did it, and that became our USP. If somebody else had picked it, then it could have become that person's USP. But remember, the issue is that you pick it and you hammer away at it, and very soon that becomes yours. So that property becomes yours, and that's the brilliance with USP, right? Obviously, one has to follow up on the promise. You can't pick speed as a USP and then have deliverables which are not corresponding to that to speed. You can't take like 2 weeks to send CVs if you are saying that I deliver quickly, right? So you have to look at your industry, and for us at that time, speed made a lot of sense because companies were hiring very quickly. I'm talking about the years 2002 to 2006 when IT was really at an upswing in India, and it worked well for our customers, and it worked brilliantly for candidates because they knew that they wanted jobs fast. So the whole thing worked out well. But remember, we picked it because it was something which we believed in, right? And I said it's a company culture issue, and that's something which all of us at that time could identify with, and we felt, yeah, this was something which was ours. So that becomes much easier for us to drive home in the sense that if we have a USP which signifies the company culture, then it becomes easier to drive that home. So that's the second way you can look at a USP. The other way you can look at a USP, and believe me, this is equally successful, is in the recruitment sense, is if you peg it on niche hiring, right? You can take a position saying that, hey, as a company, we are focused on the stuff to fill Rex. That is a position, right? And obviously, it may have to be followed by a couple of domains, but the issue is that tough to fill recs are obviously the high commission recs. So we don't do mass hiring. So while the whole world is doing mass hiring, and they're hiring in 30s and 50s and hundreds, we don't do mass hiring. Now that's a position, right? You can remember, as long as you are able to take something which is concrete, right, and communicate it, and you believe in it, it is a position, right? I may not agree with it, and there may be 50 other people who don't agree with it. It doesn't matter. As long as you think, and you're the owner and running this company, as long as you think that this makes sense, it makes sense, right? Obviously, if you take a position saying that I'm a niche hirer, or I only fill tough recs, or I only fill high commission recs, then you've got to be again sure that your delivery capabilities match that, right? And the market is big enough for you to be able to make money. Obviously, taking a positioning in a market which is too small doesn't make any sense, because you won't be able to go through with it. That's where the background work comes in, which I was telling you about earlier. But it is a position, right? It's a position which you can definitely take. You can follow up with it. You can communicate it. Being a recruiting firm which only looks at high value, difficult to fill positions, right? And I'm not talking about search. Search is a different category, because search is more on the band, right? And more on leadership hiring. But this is like tough to fill recs. That's the third way you can look at it. Another way you can look at it is search. I mean, search is a position. A lot of companies want to take it. A lot of companies do end up taking it because they add search to their company name. You don't need to do that. You can have a company name of any type and still take a position on search, saying that I am a search firm. Only reason I'm not stressing too much on it, because just taking a search position doesn't help, because a lot of companies do it. Remember what I told you earlier, it has to be unique, right? That's why the word USP, right? So if it's not unique, and if there are maybe 5,000 other firms who also call themselves search firms, then you have to take some other position within search, right? Search by itself may not be a position, right? That's one way to look at a USP, right? You can look at a USP based on, as we discussed, your domain. You can look at a USP based on your company culture, the speed example that I gave you, or you can take a look at a USP based on high commission, that is tough to fill recs, like the kind of requirements that you do. Anything is possible, but remember, not taking a position is not a good idea. So think about this. Because all of you are in a commodity business. Let's look at recruiting, right? Recruiting is a commodity business, right? It's very difficult to differentiate one recruiting firm from another. And believe me, this is not uncommon in the service business, right? You look at travel agencies, the same thing, right? Most service businesses have this problem, because unlike a product where you can build some differentiation up front, it's not that easy to do in service business. But just because it's not easy doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. In fact, you should do it, right? So I don't think not having a USP is an option, right? You should have a USP, and take your time over it, because as I said earlier, don't change it every 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 months. That's not a good idea. But definitely arrive at one, and I've given you some examples of how you can do it. But I'm sure all of you should do it, personally. You should get your team together, people whom you trust, people who know your business, and arrive at this exercise, even if it takes you a month or two. But it's something which I would strongly advise each of you who is listening to my webinar right now to do, because I don't think it's an option not to have it, right? You need to have it. So that's a bit about USP. Now let's look at, okay, so I've now got a USP, right? What do I do? See, the first thing after you get a USP is you need to first put it through the simplicity test. The simplicity test means that the USP that you have thought for yourself, is it easy to understand? Now, this is very important, okay? And the way to do it is very simply, just send it out in an email or talk to it over, talk to some people over the phone. And when you mention a USP on the phone or in an email, just ask them, what did you understand by it? Right? Because if it's a complicated USP, talent acquisition specialist, right? Okay, I'm giving you, maybe that's not the right example, but remember, any jargonized USP becomes difficult to communicate. And if it's difficult to communicate, then it's really no use having it, because it's just for you to feel good about, right? Generic USPs, jargonized USPs are really of no use, because people won't understand it, right? And if people don't understand it, then you might as well not have it. So the first test of the USP, once you've arrived at it, is to make sure that people get it, right? And people should get it instantly, right? It should be easy to understand, right? Fastest Chinese food, or Domino's 29 minutes of free, something like that. I mean, of course, maybe that's that's also a tagline in terms of Domino's, but that's really the USP, and it's so easy to understand, right? 29 minutes of free just tells me what the value prop is, right? So it's not like complicating it by saying something to do. I mean, they could have made a USP based on the pizza itself, right? But again, the way to the key is that it needs to be simple to understand, right? And that is very, very critical, right? So that's the first thing you do after you make a USP. Run it through this test and make sure that the people that you are addressing are able to get it, and they're able to get it quickly, because otherwise it's really a waste of your time. So that's step one. Step two on the USP is design how you want to communicate it, right? So when I'm saying how you want to communicate it, a USP can be communicated in various ways, right? You can communicate a USP through a print ad, through digital means nowadays, through Facebook, through Twitter, through LinkedIn. You can make radio ads. Television obviously is very expensive and maybe not that useful in a B2B situation like recruiting, right? But if you look at, so you have to evaluate. So we'll come to platform later, but you have to evaluate how you want to communicate it. So you have to design some communication. So once the USP is you're clear that this is the USP that you want to go with, and it's easy to understand, the next stage is to design some communication around it in terms of how will you tell people about it, right? That becomes very, very important, because now this you may take the help of an advertising agency or some creative guy in your own company. I did a bit of both. I was using an external advertising agency, or a creative agency as it's called, and also using an internal person who I had moved to this kind of a role when I was running a recruiting firm about 8-9 years ago. So these two people work very well together, but it was an exercise which took us some time to arrive at how do we communicate this USP, like what should be the image, what should be the font, what should be the color. All these things go into communication, right? And they are very important. Believe me, spend some time on it. So if you can come up with an image for a USP, then you are like really good, because images are easy to recollect, right? A human brain, which is why Facebook and Instagram are so popular, right? Or rather, Instagram is more popular than Facebook, is because pictures are always easier to remember as compared to words. Right, so if you can get an image for your USP, damn good. Like the Nike symbol, just do it symbol. Again, that's I'm getting slightly diverted. That's not really a USP; it's more like a tagline. But you remember the symbol more easily. The example I'm giving you because of that, rather than the word. Right. So the image is very important. If you can get an image, damn good. If you can't spend some time on it, it's important to arrive at an image. Right, and from the image will flow the color and the text, that is the font, and maybe the spacing, and how the whole thing will look. So that's important. I think it's important to spend some time on design. Yes, it can be changed. Unlike the USP, design can be changed. But if you spend some time on it initially, I think it reaps rewards in the future. So I think design is very important. Once you have cleared the step of arriving at a USP and making sure that it's simple to understand. Now, once you get the design right, then you need to pick the platform. Right. Now, the platform is obviously going to be based on the audience, that is, whom are you trying to communicate to, and your budget. Right. These are the two reasons, two single most important factors in picking a platform. Now, depending on what your budget is and where your audience is, you will pick the platform. Right. These days, again, it's become slightly simpler because of the digital era. Right. I mean, again, 10 years back, internet was still not as prevalent as it is today, right? So one was still looking at slightly the older fashioned print, like newspapers, or even radio, which had just come in at that time, at least in India, and maybe outdoor media, maybe sponsorship of events. So some real world quote unquote activities which were happening at that time, right? So those were being used to communicate. But now, of course, the digital platform is present, and I would strongly recommend that you look at digital because it's cheaper. That's very important, and most of your audience is online, so it'll be easier for you to reach out, and the cost per contact is fairly low. But having said that, I think it's an exercise you need to do yourself. Where is my audience, right? And what is my budget? And I think that these two things will determine the choice of platform. Now, remember, the choice of platform is also going to influence the design a bit, right? So sometimes the design and the platform should be a simultaneous exercise, because if you're opting for a verbal medium, like if you believe that you want to use radio, then obviously radio is not visual, so there is no question of an image, right? So you'll have to look at your USP, communicating a USP in a slightly different manner. On the other hand, if you're looking at a digital medium, right, visual is very important. But along with visual, because digital is like Photoshop or some banner kind of based, you have to think of it from that perspective. And the space is very limited. Unlike print, where ads are very large in size, in digital, the ads are much smaller. So depending on the platform will determine design a bit. But having said that, it's always good to come up with designs independent of the platform, and then modify it depending on what platform you choose, right? Because I think that's the right way to to look at this exercise, right? So once you choose the platform, then it's a question of being able to roll it out, right? And rolling out will depend again on your budget. Don't front load it, in the sense that if your budget is 10 rupees, don't spend 8 rupees in the first 2 months, because there will be a lot of learning. So remember, backloading promotion is always a better idea than front loading it. So if you have 10 rupees, spend only 20% in the first couple of months or 3 months. If you want to run if you want to run a campaign for 12 months, and then as the months roll on, just increase the budget a bit, because you will have a lot of learning which you can then use to modify your future spend. So it's always a better idea to backload it rather than front load it. That's one. Second is that, remember, any communication of a USP, as I said earlier, is a longer term commitment. So don't do it for 2-3 months. It's not going to work, right? So if your budgets are not something which allow you to be at it for 12 to 15 months, don't do it. And remember, being at it doesn't mean you have to spend 5 lakhs a month or 3 lakhs a month. You can spend 20,000 a month or whatever that amount you're comfortable with, but you have to spend it every month. Right, that's what I mean by being at it. Right, it's very important that you keep on communicating it. Right, so that's the key. That's the key message that I want to convey. And remember, there is lots of things on communicating a USP which don't cost money. For example, the emails that your company sends out. Right, all the emails that your company sends out should have a common brand identity and should have that message which you want to convey. Right, now, this doesn't cost you any money, because if you're running even a mid-sized firm, and you take a summation of all the emails which go out from your company to customers or to candidates, it would be in very large numbers, in multiples of hundreds. Right, imagine sending this thing out again and again in all the emails. Right, somewhere it'll register in the guy who's in the mind of the person who's reading the email. Right, that's for free. And what it also does is that it hammers home the point again and again. Right, so it also supports the other communication platforms that you have picked. So a lot of communication platforms would be free. And I'm sure I'm only giving you one example. There are several others which if you put your team together, or if you sit in a room and just put it down on a whiteboard, I'm sure you can come up with a lot of other options which actually don't require you to spend money. And obviously those are the best options, but they do communicate your USP, right? So it's a misnomer to think that USP communication requires or rather only requires paid for platforms, right? I think a lot of it could be just free. And the more you spend time on thinking about it, I'm sure you can come up with various other channels which are not paid for, but which do a very effective job of communicating your USP, right? The last thing I want to say is that, remember, USP is as much internal as is external, right? So in any internal communication, right, like you have your monthly meets with your employees, your weekly reviews, everybody has his own way of operating, but in each meeting, this USP needs to be communicated in some form, right? It will not happen in one meeting. Don't think that you'll call everybody together if you maybe have a mid-sized firm of 20, 25, 35 people, get everybody in the room and say, you know what, guys, this is our USP and this is the way we're going to operate from tomorrow. It's not going to happen. Nothing is going to change, right? People will hear you, but that's about it. They won't understand. So you need to do it again and again, right? So in all your meetings, all your internal communication, whichever form, and I'm sure a lot of it is on email, maybe some of it is on chat, some of it is on Skype. I don't know how you guys are doing your internal communication, but every single internal communication needs to hammer at the same message. Because remember, if your internal people have not got it, right, have not understood it, your USP, there is no way that anybody outside your organization will get it, right? So it has to start from within, right? First, it has to start from you because you're the originator, but then it needs to move to your internal employees, and they really need to get it inside their head. They need to understand it. They need to feel it, right? They need to feel the USP. They need to really, it needs to get embedded, right, in their work life. And without that, you will not be able to communicate it effectively, right? So remember, it doesn't matter how much money you spend on advertising or on any platform, what good a design you may have for the USP, or how much simple it is to understand, but it will fail if your internal people do not understand it and do not feel for it. It is, I've kept this point to the last, but let me reiterate, this is the most important thing, right? You need to be able to get your internal team to internalize the USP. Because once they internalize it, it will reflect in their entire work behavior, right? It will reflect in the way they talk to candidates, the way they talk to clients, the way they talk amongst each other, right? The whole idea will become internalized. And once the idea becomes internalized, then further communication becomes that much more easier, because if your people are living your USP, right, then that's all you need, right? Because that is the best advertising that is possible, right? So so that would be my last message on this webinar. Again, thanks everyone for attending. I've enjoyed sharing some of my experiences. Sorry I couldn't take any questions this time. We are having something tomorrow for which there will be a Q&A, and maybe the next time around we'll try and get some questions. This is a very important issue, very close to my heart, and I hope that some of you will start thinking about it. Thank you for attending the webinar.